Hello, and welcome to Off the Track for another episode of Intriguing Interviews. My name is Riley McGlue, and today I'm joined by Peter Russell,
Hello.
Michael,
Hello.
Ben,
Cowabunga.
George,
Hi.
Laurence,
Hi.
Mitchell,
Hello.
and special guest Joel Bright. So, Joel, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background in the competition?
Sure. So I started in this competition about 5 years ago from a Victorian state finalist level. I was in the team with Peter and another person, and we got through from the state finals, wildcard entry to the national finals, and then at the national finals, as Velocity, we came fourth and were merged into a team with Negative Filter. To the World Finals as Infinitude in 2016. I'm marketing manager of both Terminal Velocity and Infinitude, so I carried my role all through all stages of the competition. And like I said, we came second at the World Finals, world's fastest car, which I can't claim for, but I'll still take it. And then since competing, I've helped out a few times at the competition, and then last year I judged at the Victorian State Finals and also the Australian National Finals this year.
Awesome, thank you. So in today's episode, we will be going over marketing interviews. At every F1 in Schools competition, it is vital that teams can not only present information well in their portfolios, but also concisely articulate the information required in their interviews, as well as answer any potential questions the judges may have. In this episode, we will go over how to prepare for an interview, how interviews are typically structured, pros and cons of different approaches to the interview, as well as obtaining some insight from Joel on how to have a good marketing interview. Peter, do you have any particular advice on how you think teams should prepare for an interview?
I think it's very important to do mock interviews. That's probably one of the last things you should do. But after listening to the engineering episode we put out last week, or it wouldn't be last week when you're hearing this, but the engineering episode that you heard before, I think mock interviews was the best piece of advice I would give, because you're actually preparing for an interview in the same way that the interview will be delivered, which I think is very valuable. And yeah, do that with mentors or your teachers, and do it with the scorecards to make sure you're absolutely hitting the advanced descriptor of the criterion or the criteria. I think that's very important to do.
Yeah. So an important point there with the mock interviews is that you have to know how much preparation you should actually bring even to those mock interviews. So passive preparation compared to proactive preparation, just simply having questions, being ready to answer questions, and making sure team members know the information, compared to actually guiding the interview with the judges and having a pre-prepared plan of how you want to steer the interview. Joel, do you have any tips on whether that's a good way to go, or what you've found in the past from teams?
Yeah, so
the main differences are.
What Peter's saying is advice. Mock interviews, practicing what you're going to say. I would say from being in the competition, being in the zone, and now being on the other side and judging those interviews, the biggest thing you can do in a marketing interview is you steer. You're the one in charge, so you have to steer the judges in whatever direction you want. You've got to tell them what you want them to hear. Yeah, that goes on with interviews, and I would say that with the marketing interview, it's not a verbal presentation, so it's not a strict where you all have to, say certain things. We want marketing interviews to be coherent, and we want them to be very, flowing, so that everyone says something, and however you want to present, particularly your materials, you are the one that has to steer that conversation. We don't want, as judges, to be continuously asking you information that we need to get out of you. We want to prompt you with a couple of questions, and then you need to just say what you want us to hear.
Could I just add to that? With Precision, we took out basically all of the marketing awards at nationals, and our interview for marketing started with our team talking, and throughout the entire thing, it was far more a conversation between peers about the marketing than it was a conversation between judges and competitors. And I think if you can cultivate that kind of feeling where you're just talking about the marketing details as if you're explaining it to someone else in your team, that's a really effective way to engage the judges and for them to get a professional feel from your interview. The judges asked very few questions of us in our marketing interview because we explained everything so clearly. And the questions they did have were more of their own curiosity than anything else. So, yeah, Joel, do you think that that's probably something teams should aim for in terms of how they interact with the judges?
Well, yeah, you're spot on there, Michael. Particularly with my experience judging at the national finals only a couple of months ago, so the best teams we judged were the teams that control, and they were in charge. We weren't in charge. Myself and the other judges might have asked a couple of questions, like you said, out of our own curiosity. Where they were the ones, explaining everything, in control. It was very like you say, it was more a conversation between themselves than a conversation with us. And seems that a piece of advice that I would say as well, which I say is a common downfall for a lot of teams when it comes to marketing interviews, is everyone needs to speak. And this goes with any interview in any area. Everyone needs to talk. Everyone needs to have something to say, and everyone needs to flow on with each other, like you're just talking as if you're sitting down at a table and discussing ideas. What your pitch display is going to look like. It's just got to be a conversation, and everyone has to contribute. And particularly with marketing, team-oriented things. So, I agree with you, Michael.
Yeah, I think off of that as well is judges are almost at the competition, and especially in marketing, to be told a story, and mostly the story of how your team has gotten to its current situation, its current point, and they want to see the amount of work you've done, the progress you've taken over 3, 4, 6, however many months or weeks it's taken in order to get to your current position. I think that should be reflected in the display itself as well. The display should be a story piece in its own right, and I think that the interview should follow suit with that as well.
Yeah, so Joel had a very good point there about everyone needs to have something to say. So, Laurence, you were the design engineer for your team as well as the team manager. What did you find that you needed to say during the marketing interview? Because obviously you had the marketing side of your team. In order to do well in that interview, what did you have to do?
Well, as the team manager and also as the design engineer, I ended up having quite a lot of involvement within our pit display. Because as the team manager, I was kind of pushing everything on, really, and kind of pushing the other team members to get stuff done, essentially. But also we had a competition, which was a wheel change, and being the design engineer, I did all of the CAD work for that and sourced all the parts. So I was involved with that, and that kind of gave me something to talk about. I mean, I think the most important thing, personally, your pit display is a showcase of your team, and that is everything that you do. So there should be something that everyone can talk about. Although definitely for us, we kept it more to the areas we specialised in, rather than tutoring other team members to talk about areas that they weren't really involved in.
That's a very good point, how the booth should cover all the different aspects of the team. Have anyone else had experiences where the engineering people have had to kind of take a bigger role in the marketing interview?
Yeah, I think at the heart, the competition is about the car. Sure, there's all the other elements, but at the heart of almost everything, the car is still at focus on a lot of things. And you will probably end up having at least one question about the car. So engineers do need to be prepared to step up. But I think as well, engineers need to know about the enterprise side of things as well and be able to talk comfortably about those things. And likewise, enterprise should understand the engineering of a car. But when you're having a team stand around the pit display talking to the general public, the enterprise side of the team will not always be there. I think having that availability of every team member being able to take part of the pit display and the interview would greatly benefit not just themselves but also the team and the overall position.
Just with what you're saying, engineers knowing about enterprise and the engineers speaking about the car, you're absolutely right. As a judge, we ask. There's always a question as a marketing judge about the car, because at the end of the day, you look at this competition and what it fundamentally is. It's a competition about Formula One cars. And if you look at marketing and what marketing is, your marketing product. And so each team is marketing their car and their brand. So we are, even though, from my experience in this competition, I don't know a lot about engineering. I don't know a lot about engineering that goes into the cars. But what I do know is that when you're marketing, you are marketing that product. And so you're going to be asked about the car by a marketing judge, even if they don't fully understand the engineering and the technicalities about the car. You're going to be asked about it. And that's where the engineers need to, step up in a marketing interview and discuss and talk about their product, because without marketing that car, you're not going to get anywhere.
So, George, you obviously won the best pit display at the World Finals last year. Was there anything that you did in your marketing interview that you think really elevated it above the other interviews there?
I mean, I think one of the differences we had was that we were only a team of 3, which meant that all of us had to know all of the different areas quite well, which I think helped with our interview, because we could all talk about anything that the judges asked about. And I think we actually noticed sometimes different judges would break off into conversations with different ones of us, and we could be asked about anything, and we might not have another team member to back us up with an area that we weren't so sure about. I think one thing we had on our pit display was we had a game, like a reaction challenge thing, that we could get the judges to get involved with. And I think we found that it helped to get the judges sort of interacting with your pit display to make it more memorable and sort of as a nice introduction to introducing them to your team.
That's a nice addition to the pit display, the reaction thing. We had a reaction thing on ours as well, though it didn't seem to impress the judges at all at our pit. So I wouldn't put too great a stock in things like that. I think it's a good idea, but I think it could also come off to the judges a little bit gimmicky, and it doesn't specifically fit the criteria. But that being said, it doesn't hurt to have it there anyway, if they do like it, kind of thing,
Yeah.
I'd say that with going with what George was saying, and Michael, that the interactivity is always good. It's not vital, but it is always a good thing. And I was at the World Finals. I wasn't in a judging capacity. I was only there in a media capacity. And I can recall interviewing George's team from the media side of things. And like I said before, one of the biggest things that can rub off on a judge in a marketing interview is not your marketing materials, not your pit display, not your car. It's your presence and it's your knowledge, because you are marked on that. And at the end of the day, if you're not present and you don't know and you're not enthusiastic about it, on them more than anything else. So that's obviously a huge contributing factor to how you get judged for marketing.
Yeah, Michael brought up a good point there with the it might not hit the criteria about the gimmick. On the criteria, so in particular, Ben have you found any major changes between the Australian criteria and the world's criteria?
Yeah. So I think initially when we progressed from the national finals through to the world finals, I think one of the largest changes, well, especially for my role, organizing the pit display, was the pit display itself, because with the Australian regulations, they're very structured and they tell you exactly what they want from the interview and from the pit display itself. However, when we hit the world finals, it was definitely a lot more open. I know the Australian regulations have changed recently as well. I'm not 100% familiar with those, but I understand there's been a points increase and a push for more of a um, environmentally friendly change to the pit display and its construction. But yeah, I think there was quite the difference initially, but yeah.
George and Lawrence, was there any particular differences for you guys between your national and worlds?
I mean, I think given that the Worlds is largely organised by the F1 in Schools UK team, I think the rules are very similar for us. In terms of what they ask for, I think it doesn't change at all in this area.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the wording is word for word from the UK regulations, and normally for everything, just last year's world regulations.
Fair enough. So there's not just the difference between nationals and worlds, though. Mitch, you haven't yet competed at a world finals, but I understand that you were involved in Accelerate and Edge, so competed at 2 state finals and a national finals.
Yes.
Did you find any major differences between the state and the national finals?
Well, particularly, it's funny that you bring up Accelerate, because I was just thinking of our learning curve that we had from the trade display from 2018 states to 2019 nationals, to see where we came and how far we've developed. You can look at some photos. I don't have any handy on me, but if you look at the trade display from 2018 states, it's quite squared off at the front, and that was a specific area that the judges really disliked. And as soon as we kind of rebranded for 2019, we all agreed on having an extremely inclusive and aesthetically pleasing trade display that invited all passerbys to, come in, step in, play with our RCTs and speak to the team, and become involved within our journey, ask questions about our graphics and whatnot, and what everything means. So, yeah, I think between states last year and nationals at the beginning of this year, I don't think the jump was too extravagant. We obviously had quite limited resources to kind of adjust, as we were working with the same size regulations of the trade display. But I think we handled it quite well with everything that was proposed, just developing the brand, reflecting that within the trade display as its main, purpose in the competition. But yeah.
Yeah, and you guys came second in marketing. Do you have any key pointers on how you think a team should do well in their interview?
Well, considering as our first national finals and to come second to a returning world finalist, congratulations to Nebula. But I think the main pointers that I'd give to any newcomers would just to be confident. I know we had Joel actually as one of our judges, and it was a really, really I don't want to say easy conversation, but it was nice and laid back. No one felt nervous to have the conversation. We're all speaking extremely confidently. We were showing them our brand guidelines booklets. We were showing them our portfolios. We're handing them cars. And we're just getting the information out there. And it's funny that everyone talks about getting the engineers involved with the enterprise side, but speaking about, how the placement of the logos on the car, kind of came in with the engineering side as they would do the manufacturing. They would talk about return on investment while handing the car to the judges. And I think that's a really big pointer that I would give. The judges aren't as scary as everyone thinks. And that's definitely something I took away from nationals. Having a nice, calm conversation with judges at the marketing, the marketing kind of talk was a nice change for me. But yeah, think that's definitely the largest piece of advice I'd give a new team or any newcomers listening to the podcast.
Mitch brought up brand guidelines there. I know we did that for Infinitude at the World Finals, and the judges didn't even know we had made brand guidelines until we told them, and they were actually very impressed with what we had done. Even though it's not a something you submit, I think it's still quite valuable for teams. Joel, is it important for teams to have a brand guide, do you think, when you're judging? Is that something that you look for?
Absolutely. And you honestly, you took the words out of my mouth, Peter. I was thinking about when we were competing at the World Finals, making the brand guide. And I think it was a whole lot of other booklets we made as well. We made a financial plan or something. And, there's a whole lot of them. And like you said, none of those are submitted. But I think they remember a couple of months ago at the national finals, and even when I was interviewing other teams that have gone out there and made a brand guide and have made it so distinctly clear what they're going for in terms of their branding and who they are, what they are. This is what we want to be consistent in these ways across everything. Those are the teams that they've gone above and beyond what the regulations say. But if you're actually talking about real world situations, real what company's going to do. That's what we look for.
So, another thing, Joel, is are there any common questions as a judge that you have to ask? From your experience at the Nationals and Victorian States, was there a question that you had to repetitively ask teams because they just weren't giving you that information?
I would say investment is just massive in this competition, and you get marked on it. I think from what I remember on the Australian national final, it's 10 points, which is, I think it's about 1/6 or something like a fifth of your mark for marketing. So there's so many teams that I interviewed that we just had to try and force it out of them. Not force it out of them, but we had to facilitate the conversation. What we're really looking for is that return on investment. What these teams have gone out. Yes, they've gone out and got the money from somewhere, products from somewhere, but what we're giving back to those companies, what's benefiting from being partners with you? And that was just something we had to ask a whole lot of teams to give information on, because it wasn't clear in their portfolio. So we wanted to make sure that teams had the opportunity to discuss with us.
Joel, in your experience interviewing teams, is there anything that you see teams do that they probably shouldn't? Or is there anything that you'd recommend teams shouldn't do?
I wouldn't say there's anything that I've seen the team shouldn't do necessarily. I've seen it's really bad. But what I would say is that I don't want to see as a judge, and particularly that from what I role of competing, that I think I emphasise to our team. We don't want this to be a one-person show. Everyone contribute. In all honesty, Peter, when we were doing those marketing interviews, it could have been me and you just talking the whole time, or plus Nicole a little bit. It could have been us just telling them everything. But it to be a one-person or two-person show, it needs to be the whole team contributing. So that's what I would say. The biggest thing that, not necessarily a don't do this, but to put it the other way, do make sure that everyone gets involved, because that's ultimately the biggest part of this competition, if you ask me, getting everyone involved.
Just thinking back to our time with Infinitude, do you think there's anything, I don't know, we could have done better? I mean, we did quite well in marketing and branding and all those sorts of areas, but I can't remember now if there's anything we could have improved on, but I'm sure there must have been. I can't remember anything, but do you remember?
And in terms of marketing and branding, I think we were pretty spot on with that stuff. But potentially, I think it might have been. I would say that maybe I don't know if you would put some marketing, maybe branding. The portfolio, maybe we could have improved that a little bit. And I don't mean to hit on you, but I think we.
I agree.
All of us, time management. I don't know. I guess that would tie into pretty much every element of the competition. Not just marketing or not just engineering. The time management we could have improved on. Most teams, they will say that we can improve on time management, but I think we did a pretty good job overall.
I think that's a very universal problem with F1 schools teams.
It is.
It is just time management in general and being able to plan out your time. And I think if you can actually manage your time properly, you'll be far more productive and be able to get more done and to a better standard in a shorter period of time, because you don't have to rush.
Yeah. So even in the marketing interview itself, time management is very important because like you have to make sure you have to hit all of the points on the different criteria. And if you don't manage to, so for example, on the Australian scorecards, you have two, correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, but both criteria 8 and criteria 7 to get through and talk about with those judges, which is a total of 125 points.
That's
So
right.
you need to make sure that you manage to like allocate enough time to each thing based on the points it's worth.
I mean, I remember interviewing one team for national finals. That there was, a certain team that they hit on every single point on that criteria, and the interview didn't go for half an hour. It only went for, I think we're allocated 10 minutes. I think it didn't even go for 10. And this team hit on absolutely every single point on that criteria. And like we've been saying previously, it wasn't us as judges steering the conversation at all. That team was completely in control. They were telling us everything they wanted us to hear. And that is where you come in with time management and preparation and everything that we've spoken about. That team was just absolutely hit the nail on the head with every single thing in that marketing interview, every single criteria, and it all worked for them.
Yeah. So speaking about interviews like that, like what is the key? So we've been talking about having all team members contribute a lot, but are there any other key things that make an interview stand out to you?
Like a flow kind of conversation. Like I think I've said this previously as well. We don't want it to be like, I ask a question, you respond, you wait for my next question. Like we want it to be, aside from hitting on all the information that's required, we want it to be like I've said. I ask a question, then you start talking, and then you're talking, you think of something else, flows on, someone else starts talking about something, and then that could go for honestly 3 minutes, and you've just hit 5 or 6 criteria out at once by just having a conversational style interview. And like for me, that was teams that did so well at the national finals, so that I judged well with those teams that were. It was like a conversation.
I think, just adding to this, I think maybe the term interview is the wrong way to think about it, because interview generally denotes someone asking someone else questions. You think about a job interview, you're usually getting asked a lot of questions about why you're suitable for the job. I think if you look at a sales pitch, that probably fits far more with what we're looking at here in F1 in schools, because you said it before, Joel, the product we're selling essentially is the car, and that's what the brand and the marketing is about. So if teams were to start to think about it as a pitch rather than an interview, do you think that would be a more effective framework for them to think through?
I think with some teams as well, I think Ben might have spoken about this before, or might have been Mitchell, that we're not, as judges, we're not there to mark you down. It might be different when you're having an engineering interview, but marketing, we're not there. We're there to simply do what you're showing us and what you're telling us. We're not there to ask you a whole bunch of questions and have you fire back answers. Yeah, pretty much completely right. It's a sales pitch would be a much better way of thinking about it.
And just to add slightly onto that, sorry, I remember from our marketing interview, something that's a massive driver for this. Well, I know especially for us was like seeing the reaction of the judges when we handed them, say, our prospectus or the portfolio, or like I said before, the branding guidelines booklet, and seeing the reactions and seeing, like looking around, it kind of gets the team to try and strive to do better within the next 2 sentences that you might speak it, giving the team that reimagination within the kind of content they'll cover. But
yeah so this is just a general question for everyone. Is there any unexplored opportunities you'd like to see teams explore in their interviews or in their pit display?
Well, I think Peter mentioned it earlier with brand guidelines, and I think it's a really good opportunity. For example, within our portfolio itself, I think we have slightly over half the page that we managed to write about the pit display, just because there's not enough space to get everything in. So for the World Finals, we made an additional document just about the pit display, showing us kind of past pit displays, the concept behind them, and improvement actions, things from what the judges told us that we then put into the next pit display. And we also had a section on contingency planning for if our freight didn't reach the World Finals, as we know that lots of teams over past years haven't actually received their freight, and obviously, given the amount of work that goes into a World Finals entry, we didn't want that to be the end that put us out of contention. So we found out where we could get items to fill the space from shops in Abu Dhabi, and found out printers where we could print graphics for those. So I think, lots of F1 in schools is actually just about documenting what you do. Like for the engineering, you need to get in just everything that you've done. I get the same with the marketing. So I don't really see that it's any different with the pit display.
I think that's very, very clever, the contingency planning, Laurence, because I wish we had done some of that for Infinitude, because when we thought, we were given loads of assurances by our shipping companies, nothing's going to break, it's all going to be there on time. But when we started setting it up, it became apparent that a few things had broken, and it was quite prominent, the breakage that we had on our pit display. Luckily, we were able to cover it up, but I don't think we had planned, not to the extent that you did, Laurence, about contingency planning, even going as far as looking at shops in Abu Dhabi that stocked your merchandise. But yeah, it wasn't a great feeling when we got to Abu Dhabi and our pit display was broken.
Purple texture can't fix Peter.
Yeah, I know.
But going on with what you're saying, Laurence, I think I haven't looked at the world regulations of late, so I'm not 100% certain, but particularly in the Australian regulations, for the pit display marking, there's a massive amount of points that are given to sustainability and design, and the thought that goes behind the design. I think both of them might even be worth 15 points. But I think I saw a team at the Australian National Finals, I think, that had a separate booklet for the pit display and had things like contingency plans, development of materials, consideration of sustainability. And I think, whilst that might not be the most exciting thing to be doing with your pit display or with your marketing interview, that is worth a very big portion of your mark for the pit display. And so for a team to be considering all of this and documenting it all, like you say, the competition is basically documenting everything you do. For a team to be putting that all into a booklet, that is, a real consideration of something teams haven't really done in the past. I don't recall, Peter, when we went to Texas in 2016, we did a lot of documents, but I don't recall a pit display document or a document about materials being one of them. So I think that's something that's evolved in the competition, since they're now considering sustainability a lot more. Something for the pit interviews is to show your judges that through a document that you have considered materials, you have considered sustainability, particularly for a World Finals where transportation is just everything when it comes to your pit display. You could be coming from all the way across the other side of the world. So you've really got to consider sustainability and design to be able to transport your because whilst our pit display looked great at the World Finals, I think looking back, the 600 boxes, and particularly when we were packing down, it was not a fun time.
No, it wasn't. No. Yeah, the packaging, I think, was our biggest sort of downfall, and yeah, the costs involved with that were just immense. If we could have, sort of overcome that in some way, I think that's definitely the area to improve on, at least in our experience.
Yeah, that was a really interesting point brought up earlier, though, about sustainability and how that's becoming more prominent in the regulations as they've been updated throughout recent years. With the introduction last year of the Alfa Romeo Sustainability Award, for example. Does anyone have... so, George, you guys, again, obviously won Best Pit Display last year. Did you emphasize... How did you talk about your sustainability of your pit to the judges? What would you say is the key behind having a sustainable booth?
I mean, the main things with our booth was that we tried to, like, in terms of sustainability, were that we tried to reduce the transportation impact and also make it out of mostly recyclable materials. So we had our pit display had a cardboard structure, which meant that it folded up into a very concise box, which meant we could just transport it as one of our suitcases on our flights, which helped with reducing, well, it saved us money as we didn't have to pay for extra shipping. It gave us peace of mind that it was less likely to get lost, but also it reduced the ecological impact of having to transport a pit display. And then the cardboard was also recyclable. Those were the main ideas behind our pit display.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything they want to cover? Or
I was just going to add a note about the documentation of the pit display. We talked about in the last Intriguing Interviews episode, auxiliary documentation, and certainly you can include in auxiliary documentation. It looks really good, but just make sure that it serves a purpose. It's not just a bunch of raw data or something like that. It needs to actually, still follow your brand guidelines, and it still needs to present information that is valuable to the judges and couldn't be put in the portfolio or any other part of your disclosable materials, and that kind of thing. So just keep that in mind when creating auxiliary documentation.
all right. Thanks for listening to Off the Track. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, you can rate the show on Apple Podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Instagram at Off the Track Podcast and visit us at offthetrack.net.